there's all these new ways for people to engage with real money products, which aren't sports betting in its purest form. And for me, that really is like the defining characteristic of the US market right now. Of course, sports betting remains the heart of it all. And from an early stage perspective, there still continues to be an influx of ideas and talent pursuing different opportunities within the sports betting vertical. But there is this broad recognition now that that's not the only game in town. There are other adjacent sort of modalities of play and gameplay that present interesting opportunities for entrepreneurs in this space.
This podcast is sponsored by Pragmatic Solutions, the player account management platform chosen by today's smart betting and gaming operators. Don't let technical constraints delay you from achieving your business goals. Expand your business, boost your margins, and dominate the market in any leading regulated jurisdiction with our powerful, flexible, and secure iGaming platform. Enjoy its extensive marketing tools, compliance protection, real-time data, and a wide portfolio of over 1,000 industry providers. It's time to upgrade your technology. Let Pragmatic Solutions show you the modern approach. Visit pragmatic.solutions and join the smart thinkers.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
Bingo, bango, bongo, my friend. Jesse Learmonth back in the podcast for a yearly tradition here at the Next podcast. How are you doing today, Jesse?
I'm great, my friend. Third year in a row, Pierre, being Canadian. I'll throw out a hockey reference. I think that makes it a hat trick. So excited to celebrate this milestone with you, my friend.
It is absolutely a hat trick, and being growing up in a little hockey village in Sweden, I can definitely appreciate that analogy. So exciting times for sure, Jesse. And like we had talked about last week when I guested your podcast, it's an absolute pleasure to have gotten to know you over these couple of years. And this is a true podcast friendship, right, with you over in the North American side. And I'm doing my thing over here in Europe. So couldn't be more excited to have you back here, Jesse. And I have to ask, the vinyl records that you have behind you, can you name 3 of your favorite ones that you have there for those who can see?
So I'll caveat by saying the room I'm recording in right now isn't my office, but it does have a cool backdrop here with these vinyl records on the wall. These weren't my selections, but they're like a random mix of old like country music. There's Dolly Parton, what do I see there? Neil Diamond, Roy Orbison, Elvis is everywhere. I feel like the friend of mine that owns this office, I think he went to a garage sale, probably picked up like a box of them for probably $5 and put them up against the wall here. And it's a cool backdrop, but I can't say that any of this music is stuff that I listen to regularly on my Spotify playlist.
Yeah, and Beyonce winning a Grammy of the Year for the new hot
country music,
for the new hot trend over in the US in country music. I didn't have that on my bingo card, that's for sure. But yet here we are in 2025.
Here we are. Well, perhaps we'll have to ask to get a Beyonce vinyl record put up on the wall here to complete the set.
Yes. We'll have to see that for next time. So, Jesse, of course, you're based over in North America, Canadian as you are, and you have such an amazing kind of finger on the scale over in the US when it comes to gambling startups over there. And that's what we're going to talk about today, kind of taking a bit of a temperature check of the startup landscape over in North America. The backdrop of this, of course, is that we have our next New York coming up on the 12th and 13th of March. You guys are launching your Starties award show, which we are super excited about. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on today. But first and foremost, I want to ask you, Jesse, talk about your own project a little bit, bettingstartups.com. You've been running this for a couple of years now. You're becoming more prolific as time goes on. What have you learned so far running this project, and how are things going?
Sure. So I'll start with the how are things going part to it. It's funny, Pierre, a year ago when I last joined you on this podcast, I actually re-listened to that episode a few weeks ago. I'll admit that after we recorded that one a year ago, we finished that recording. And at that time, just to contextualize it a bit, my baby was 3 weeks old at that time. I was on paternity leave, but I kind of came out of the fog for a minute to record that with you. And we finished that recording and I'm like, I don't know what I just said over that last hour. So I was really like, it's kind of funny for a guy that records a podcast every week. I felt really like I did a horrible job. So I didn't want to listen to it. It was like very cringe for me. Only a couple of weeks ago, finally, did I listen to that conversation you and I had a year ago. And one thing I said to you in that conversation, as it relates to betting startups, and back to your question here, at that time, I was very much still treating it like a hobby project, a creative outlet, something kind of fun for myself. I was very reluctant to acknowledge that this is a business that I'm building. So I think probably the big shift between then and today is I've now fully embraced the fact that I am now building a business around this. To your point, there is a lot of, I think, momentum and sort of goodwill that betting startups as a platform has built over 3 years of doing what I've been doing. So I am now more actively, I would say, looking at how do I build a business around this. It's a media business. I've never built a media business. I'm learning on the job here. It's been a lot of fun, but kind of taking that next step in the progression of this project has been really cool. And, there's a lot of initiatives now we're looking at and then we have committed to, including the Starties, which again, we'll talk about. But really, yeah, the key development over the last year is I've made that mental shift now from hobby project to business and everything that comes with that. So, we have revenue now. I've built a team out around me. Last year, this time I was still a lone wolf kind of doing it all myself. So, we're really now like looking at how do I build an organization, build a team? How do we build a meaningful business around that? What are some interesting ways to leverage the goodwill we've developed over the last 3 years? And don't have all the answers here today, but having a lot of fun playing around with it. And we'll see where it all leads.
Yeah, but that's the beautiful thing about building passion products, I think, Jesse, is that, we start up with just a product that you just have a love and an affection towards, that you don't know where it's going, you don't have a kind of like a set business plan, but you know that you have something there and something to work on. And as time goes on, that picture becomes much more clear. I mean, in our case, we started our business now 13 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we did it because we loved organizing events. We had no idea what we wanted to do with the business. We had certainly no idea that we would end up organizing conferences and hosting podcasts and media. But, through time, you kind of slide into these interesting pathways, and sooner rather than later, you'll find your way into a sustainable business model. And I think that's kind of the phase that you are finding yourself in now, by the sounds of it, that you started out with a cool passion project, kind of starting a podcast, fun to do it. And then, it leads into an actual real business, which is, what you have managed to create today. So it's exciting to follow, year by year.
Yeah, it is exciting. And I think like in many ways, it's very meta that for a guy that talks to startups all day, like I'm now treating this project like a startup, right? So really, I think what I've done and proved to myself so far is if I take the perspective that the podcast is the minimum viable product here, I think I have validated to some extent there is some level of product market fit, right? There's an audience there. There's a lot of engagement. There's a lot of downstream, I would say, effects of the podcast within the wider ecosystem. People making new connections, getting introductions by virtue of being guests on the podcast. So I proved to myself that there's something here. It's just now a question of, like, to your point, where does it go? And I don't, again, know right now, but this is the fun part of the journey, is marching forward and trying some things, seeing what works, what doesn't, and iterating. And, hopefully in the process, continue to add value to the ecosystem and build a nice little business in the process.
Yeah, right. And you don't have any investors to your business, right? Like, this is a product that is owned by you and your colleague, I think.
Correct. Yeah. No, we're lone wolves in that regard. I don't have external people on the cap table, so have a lot of latitude there insofar as decision making goes.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing of the process that you're in now, is that you can afford that luxury of not having to stress into some like hyper generative, like hyper revenue building product that you are forced into because you have investors that are requiring that from you. You're still in this phase where you can kind of take those twists and turns, and that's the thing. Like, taking in investment is such a commitment from that front, because you are really committing yourself to building revenues quick. Like no investor would accept that kind of playful mindset of like, oh yeah, I don't know where the business is going, but I think I'll figure it out eventually. Kind of thing. They want to understand like what is the actual plan that they are, and business plan that they are putting their hard-earned money into. And I think, for startups in general, it can be a good thing to think about on that perspective sometimes, that like, it could be good if you can have the luxury of not taking in capital too early, to be able to go through that experimentation phase, because the business might turn out completely different with a much bigger scope actually in the long run, if you have that patience and not like committing yourself to too much on certain projects and whatnot. So yeah, it's good to hear that you're in still this phase.
Yeah, and I haven't talked a lot publicly about this in terms of some of the earlier parts of my own journey, but I have been on that treadmill once before. My entry into the industry, I started a company, we raised money from investors, and to your point, it immediately put us on a treadmill where there was expectations that weren't our own, and we really, in retrospect, I somewhat wish we didn't raise that capital. Of course, at that time we needed it, so it wasn't really an option. But now that I'm here, knowing what I know and to do it all again, I am interested personally in preserving my optionality for as long as I possibly can, which could include forever, right? I have no particular ambition to add external investors to the cap table for this project. I would never necessarily say no, but as of right now, there's no intention to do that. And I want to keep doing this my way, on my own terms, on my own timeline. And I do appreciate, from the perspective of investors, they're in business for a reason, which is to seek a clear path to getting returns. They need to have conviction that the people they're backing are committed to that as well. And I can't give that level of commitment right now. So therefore, we'll continue as lone wolves on the cap table. And we'll do our best with what resources we have.
Good. And it adds 1 extra hour of sleep per night also, not to have VCs on your cap table, they say. In any case, I want to take a step back and take the helicopter view here and just ask you a little bit of an open-ended question on what are the dynamics, do you think, Jesse, that are driving the US gambling markets currently? I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on right now, right? With Cashier and Robinhood and kind of futures trading, betting that is becoming a new thing. Obviously, DFS 2.0, sweepstakes, there's so many things happening at the same time. But can you give your overview of what are the driving factors and dynamics of the US market today?
I think you set it up nicely there, Pierre. That is really my broad assessment of the landscape right now, is the sense that there are new categories emerging that people might have expected would emerge. But I think the speed and intensity in which they have entered the scene and the attention that that's drawn, really, I didn't expect to see this soon, perhaps. So just to name check a couple, which you already did, DFS 2.0 or even DFS 3.0, I've heard a few references to now. We're in a new era for that vertical. Sweepstakes, obviously, over the last year has had its moment and is, remains very topical and remains very unresolved insofar as how it will shake out from a regulatory perspective, if at all. Prediction markets also have recently had their moment with the U.S. election, and as at the time of recording here, there continues day over day to be news about new entrants into that market, and then CFTC rulings, saying that they have to withdraw. And there's every day it seems like I wake up to a new headline as it relates to prediction markets. So, taken at large here, my assessment is sports betting in its purest form, and really, what the repeal of PASPA enabled in that pure form of sports betting no longer is the only game in town. There's all these new ways for people to engage with real money products, which aren't sports betting in its purest form. And for me, that really is the defining characteristic of the US market right now. Of course, sports betting remains the heart of it all. And from an early stage perspective, there still continues to be an influx of ideas and talent pursuing different opportunities within the sports betting vertical. But there is this broad recognition now that that's not the only game in town. There are other adjacent sort of modalities of play and gameplay that present interesting opportunities for entrepreneurs in this space. And I think we're going to continue to see that play out, both with the categories we just mentioned, but also I would not be the least bit surprised in 2025 here to see some new variant or some new category emerge and establish itself as a viable alternative to sports betting in its purest form. So super interesting times. I do feel like 2024, late 2023, early 2024, we felt like we were in a bit of a lull in the US market. It was kind of okay, there's a duopoly at the top with FanDuel and DraftKings, and there's all the downstream consequences of this market dynamic. But over the last 6, 8, 12 months, that's really shifted. And it's really, I think, reignited enthusiasm for the space. It's also brought in, as I say, a lot of new ideas and a lot of new people that are building. So I'm re-energized after maybe a little bit of a period of hibernation. And we're back in a big way, I'd say.
Yeah, the gloves are certainly off, especially in United States now after the election, and business is booming left, right, and center here. Donald Trump Jr. joining the board of Calci and kind of giving an edge to their regulatory prospects, let's say, in front of the CFTC. But I'm curious as well to know, Jesse, so we are kind of saying here that you have the regulated, the traditionally regulated part of the industry with the DraftKings and FanDuels, and we know the household names that are pursuing that regulated strategy. And then you have these kind of newer entries that are trying to enter from left field in different creative ways outside of the regulatory landscape, albeit still legally. When you think about like the startup landscape overall right now, most of the startups that are popping up, are they still targeting the regulated side of the industry, or do you see mostly entries that are coming from left field, let's say, or these creative directions into the gambling landscape?
So I would say for the most part, a lot of the startups I see that come across my platform are still entering the space, looking at a regulated path into it. I would also say that for some, and this has been an interesting insight over the last year in conversations I've had, is that as some of them have entered the regulated space, they've quickly learned and realized that there are a lot of headwinds and that, things move slow in the regulated space. And for, innovators, you want to move fast and break things, right? So those two things are incongruent. And oftentimes some of these founders with their ideas for the regulated space realize they're running into a brick wall. So what can they do? A lot of them are now looking to alternative ways to get their idea to market, whether that be, looking at pre-regulated markets outside of the US. That does seem to be a bit of a playbook that some entrepreneurs are following right now. They're like, look, we can't get traction, particularly for the B2B startups trying to sell into the sports books. We've talked a lot, as have you, about the dreaded, operator integration roadmap and backlog, and people don't have time for that, right? So they're looking for alternative methods to get their products to market. So, the pre-regulated markets outside of the US present an interesting, option for these entrepreneurs. So, full circle, like I do see the on-ramp still being the regulated space, but I also then see a bit of a recognition that maybe things aren't moving there as fast as some of these entrepreneurs want to move with their ideas. So that all being said, yeah, look, there's, again, much like the prediction markets and news coming out every day, I feel like barely a day or a week can go by without seeing a new sweepstakes brand or platform launching, and so much innovation happening in that space. And a lot of capital and talent is rushing into that category right now for good reason. A lot of the numbers being talked about are eye-popping, and it seems like there is a growth trajectory for that category. So inevitably it's drawing in a lot of attention right now. But yeah, look, the regulated market is still the big opportunity everybody's pursuing. And for all of the challenges we talk about trying to get things done in the regulated market, the reality is if you can cross that chasm and get traction in the regulated market, you all of a sudden have a wonderful defensible moat for your business potentially, because you know how hard it is to break through, get that traction. For other people that are trying to compete with you, come in behind you, they're going to go through that same thing. And not everybody's going to have the patience or, persistence to push through the ceilings necessary to get that traction. So there's two sides to that coin, but yeah, for the most part, there's still a lot of good ideas coming into sports betting, and that's what I get up every morning for, is to talk to these people that are bringing these cool ideas to market.
And speaking of that, I'm curious to dig deeper a little bit in some of the specific startups that you are really impressed by at the moment. So I was thinking, Jesse, if we can select, let's say, 5 startups and we can zoom into them kind of one by one, just to hear from your perspective, more specifically what is happening in terms of innovation and new startups coming to market, and how are they looking to enter, and what type of products are they building. So I'll leave the word over to you, Jesse. What's your first startup that you want to present to the audience today?
All right, this is a fun segment, Pierre, so let's get into it. 5 startups. It's going to be hard to get too far into this list without naming this first one, which is an operator called Betty. And Betty, founded by an entrepreneur called Justin Park. A lot of us know Justin. Shout out to Justin and his team. They've really taken the iGaming vertical by storm in their home market of Ontario. They launched, I don't even think it's been 2 years now. And just a few weeks ago, Pierre, I don't know if you saw this, Justin put up a post on LinkedIn where he shared some metrics publicly from a Q4 report he sent out to his stakeholders. And luckily, I am grateful to Justin for sharing a copy of that Q4 report with me, which has a bit more deeper insights than his LinkedIn post. He also said I could share some of those details, so I will. Just to contextualize this a little bit, the company's barely 2 years old, operating only in the home market of Ontario, as I mentioned. They are on a 9-figure US dollar revenue run rate. $114 million revenue run rate is what Justin cited in this report. I'm hard pressed to think of a sub 2-year-old business within this space that's achieved that level of scale in the regulated market as quickly as Betty has. And I think there's a few interesting threads to this one, Pierre. Number one, Justin himself is near the top of the pound for pound of my list of just like absolutely like dialed in entrepreneurs, dialed in founder. This is his third startup, and he actually was on my podcast a year and a half ago, guest hosted by our mutual friend Benji. Hello, Benji. And Justin really told an interesting story around how Betty's his third startup. His first one was like, if you want to use a baseball metaphor here, his first one might have been like a line drive to center field, which was like okay for a first at bat. His second startup, QL Media, he exited. That was a much better result, but it wasn't like, it wasn't like a moonshot scale outcome, but it was like one that allowed him to kind of get an exit under his belt, get some points on the board. And really, he set up Betty now as his third startup, which is the one now he feels ready personally as a founder to take the moonshot, to swing for the fences, whatever, again, like analogy you want to use here. This is his big shot with Betty. And again, like 2 years in, he is tracking exceptionally well to hit that, right? 9 figures in revenue. I'm just pulling up the report. I want to make sure I get a couple numbers right here, Pierre. He said at the beginning of 2024, a year ago, their goal was to achieve a $20 million revenue run rate. And they've almost 6x that target in the year. Similarly, they were looking to grow their customer base to 6,600 monthly active players in 2024. They are now at just about 40,000. So whatever the math is there, like 6 times their target. They're overachieving in every area. And my final stamp on Betty is that with the success they've had, and I think what the most interesting innovation I've seen now come from Betty is what Justin is now setting up for the next phase of their company, which is how does he replicate this successful model they've established in Ontario in other jurisdictions? And the way he's thinking about it, and I love this framing, he's looking at what he calls like a McDonald's franchise model. They're looking to take all of the IP, the know-how, everything they've developed that's led to the success in Ontario and replicate that in other jurisdictions by franchising out and licensing out their tech, their IP, like all of the know-how, their marketing capability, which is a huge critical success factor for them, and putting in sort of like independent businesses in different jurisdictions that are led by independent CEOs for those businesses under a franchise model. And I love the McDonald's metaphor there because immediately that's something everybody understands. And I think if he can achieve even a fraction of the success they've proven in Ontario in other jurisdictions, Betty's going to the moon. It's been an absolutely impressive story to follow. Justin is running an absolute clinic right now. He's a very humble entrepreneur. He's very, very quick to give credit to his team, and he's built an amazing team around him for that matter. So I'll start this list off by shouting out Betty first and foremost.
Yeah, an incredible business. I mean, they have 10 doubled the net revenue from the month of January to the month of December in 2024, almost. And it's a really interesting idea to franchise a brand like that, because if he has entered Ontario as a local hero, let's say, and figured out what are the kind of main drivers of success against the massive incumbents in that particular market, maybe that can be turned into a formula and say, okay, these are like the 6, points that you need to distinguish yourself from in any given market. Understand the customer who you are targeting and kind of double down on the local dynamics in each state or in each market. And that recipe can perhaps be replicated in each state if you answer a couple of easy questions that, let's say, Justin have figured out along the way. Super interesting, because I haven't heard that before, actually, taking that, like, let's say, local hero approach, expanding your company into different states and retaining that local hero approach by letting a local team run each of these markets. Very interesting to hear.
One final point I do want to make on Betty, and I don't want to turn this into an episode on Betty specifically because we have other startups to talk about, but one other final interesting insight is, I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but Betty raised, I think it was like $1.8 million as a seed round. That $1.8 million seed round was led personally by Justin. He had so much conviction around what they were building. He put in the first half or 60% or whatever the number is of that round himself personally, which did a few things. Number one, that signaled to other capital allocators. It's like, well, if this founder has this much conviction about what he's building, he's putting his own money into it, that says a lot. That's a very powerful and strong signal to external investors. But the other thing that does, Pierre, is, for Justin, that means he can still call the shots. You and I talked earlier in this conversation about the fact that when you bring external capital onto your cap table, you're somewhat beholden to these investors. There's a level of expectation and accountability. And in Justin's case, that continues to be true because he does have external investors. But because he led the round himself, and I don't know the exact sort of nuances of their corporate governance, but I would reasonably assume he still maintains a lot of control over the direction, being the lead investor in his own round, right? So he's almost got like best of both worlds there. Obviously for him, it's big risk putting that own personal capital into it, but certainly here in the early innings of the Betty journey, it looks like there's a high ROI on that. So I thought that was a really cool anecdote as well, because you don't really hear about founders leading their own, seed rounds very often. And this, is another great example of how Betty's definitely operating a little bit differently than most.
Definitely, Jesse. Fascinating business. Moving on to startup number 2. Who do you got?
All right. So the next one I want to shout out here is one that launched like just a few months ago. So they're truly a startup. They launched, I believe, in October. This is called Gambly, Gambly AI. A couple interesting things on Gambly here. Number one, it was co-founded and is co-founded by a couple serial entrepreneurs within our space. So Gambly is co-founded by Cal Spears. Cal, very well known for being the co-founder of Pocket Fives poker site way back in the day, probably back when you're in your poker heyday, Pierre.
Yeah.
So Pocket Fives was huge within the poker world. Cal then went on after selling that business to found Roto Grinders, which was a very early
DFS
site within DFS. Exactly that. In the meantime, and then Roto Grinders sold to Better Collective. Cal was part of Better Collective for a while, but Cal is not. It doesn't strike me as a person that's really willing to like sit back and rest for too long, because he's back for another bite at the apple with Gambly. And his co-founder in this one is Jonathan Bales, who himself is a serial entrepreneur in the space. He founded Fantasy Labs, which was acquired by the Churning Group, which then took Fantasy Labs as well alongside a couple other assets. And collectively that formed the Action Network, which of course remains one of the largest sort of sports betting media properties within US betting. So anyway, Jonathan and Cal got together on Gambly. They spent a year developing this technology before they launched it in October. And what Gambly is, Pierre, just to give it a bit of an elevator pitch for it, it's an AI chatbot, but really what it does, it allows people to shortcut the time to find the bets that they want to make. And they're using simple prompting, AI prompting, and they have a lot of very complicated technology under the hood that allows the relevant search results, if you will, from the prompt to be surfaced immediately to the user. And furthermore, they've done a very interesting sort of integration where, the user can use this prompt to pull up what they want to find, but then Gambly makes it very easy for those users to then click through to pre-populate a bet slip with their sportsbook of choice and very quickly and seamlessly and easily place that bet. They also just recently launched a bot on Twitter whereby, and I don't know how much time you spend sort of scrolling American gambling Twitter. It's a wild place at times, but I spend a fair bit of time scrolling there just to make sure I'm like capturing the sentiment from the bettors and the consumer side of the ecosystem. And what you'll see on there very quickly is you see people constantly sharing their bet slips on there, screenshots of their bets, screenshots of their DFS lineups, constant sort of like notion of like sharing these screenshots. And what the Gambly AI bot does is allows people to see a screenshot that they might have in their Twitter feed. The Gambly bot will then extract whatever the selections are from that screenshot. It will then create a link to a sportsbook, and it will basically, again, link to a FanDuel, a DraftKings, whomever, populating a bet slip with all of the markets that were on that screenshot. So like super useful, super interesting. Wow. And talking to Cal over the last little while, they're getting a tremendous amount of engagement with it. And I see that as being like a pretty true innovation. Obviously, AI is a very hot space right now, but I think the way they're thinking about it and the way they've implemented the product and just made it insanely usable, easy to use, low friction, really solving a meaningful problem for people that are oftentimes struggling to find the markets they want within the sports books that they use. Gambly's made it dead easy to do that. Final thing I'll say on Gambly, Pierre, is I did have Cal and Jonathan on my podcast a few months ago. And one thing I thought was very interesting and coming to the innovative part beyond the product that really resonated with me is Cal, with his background, really comes from a deep affiliate world, right? He's as well versed in the affiliate landscape as anybody I know. And he has a bit of a thesis that the traditional CPA model for affiliates is dying a slow death, and probably a lot of what we saw in the fall from the listed companies, Catena, Better Collective, maybe there's some suggestion there that might be somewhat true. So I guess, taking that together with what they're building at Gambly, Cal's hypothesis is that the next wave of affiliates is going to be an innovation on the model for affiliates. The CPA model might still exist, but it's going to be complemented by new models that are yet to emerge. And I think Gambly could be one of the driving forces behind some new models. And Cal spoke to how he's thinking about it specifically, which is that if you accept the premise that this Gambly product is driving bet slips and betting and tickets for the operators, it's driving transactions. It's basically driving retention for these operators, right? So Cal thinks rather than monetizing the top of funnel new customers and getting the CPA for it, Gambly could be driving retention for the operators. And potentially there's a world in which for Gambly as the affiliate in that case, they could be compensated on a per bet basis, right? So for every bet that's placed with the FanDuel or a DraftKings that's attributable back to the Gambly product, Cal thinks there's a way or a world in which, they could be compensated on a per bet basis for every incremental bet they're driving. There's an opportunity there. Of course, like that's a big shift and a big sort of, shift for the operators to have to like wrap their heads around, and it will take some time. But I love the fact that he's not only thinking about innovation from a product perspective, but innovation from a monetization perspective.
Right, and affiliates moving away from this like mindless sending traffic to an operator and moving on against the CPA, but rather helping the operator with the retention strategies as well. I think there's another project also called Forever Network that is doing something similar on that front, which is an affiliate, but an affiliate that has built an incredibly strong community that is then leveraging that towards an affiliate model in order to drive not just CPAs, but the longer term commitment as well. Really interesting there.
All right, next on the hit list, I'll try and keep these short, Pierre. Am I good to keep going here?
Yeah, go ahead. Number 3.
I think I cut you off. Okay. Next one on the list I want to call out here is fluid payments. And fluid payments is interesting to me for a few reasons. So I'll shout out to Rob from Fluid, who I met in Lisbon this past fall. He sat down, recorded a podcast with me. A couple interesting threads to Fluid, Pierre. Number one, and I said this to Rob in our episode, he's building, number one, I guess I'll contextualize what Fluid is for any that are unaware. He's really innovating in the cashier experience. So every real money platform out there obviously has a money in, money out component. The money is the lifeblood of any real money gaming business. We all know this. What Rob's doing is really trying to minimize the friction for people, for customers to get their money in to the platforms and out of the platforms. And there is something we're all familiar with, which is called the cashier experience, right? This is the page you load up in your casino or sportsbook of choice, and you have the menu of payment options that are supported. And the cashier experience oftentimes is very incongruent and inconsistent with the rest of the user experience. And there's a lot of valid technical reasons for that. But all that to say, the cashier experience itself is really like an unsexy part of the overall stack. And given the importance of getting that money in and that money out, Rob saw that as an opportunity to bring more, to apply a layer of UX and usability to the cashier experience and make it as, easy to use as the rest of the gaming product mix. And he is having really strong initial traction. They only came to market just a year ago at last year's ICE, and they signed their first customers at that first conference they were at. It really is solving a pain point for the operators. And I think very quickly they're demonstrating that their cashier solution is driving the key KPIs as it relates to money in, money out, reducing failed payments, all of these sort of things that are critically important to driving metrics for the operators and for the customers, minimizing the headaches and pain points, right? Like when you're making a payment, you have purchase intent. And if you get interrupted anywhere in the checkout process or the payment process, you're likely to bounce and go to a different operator and spend your money there. So really solving a critical pain point. What I also really love about Rob's story, and to me, this is a trend line I took away from all of my conversations in 2024, Pierre, was that Rob comes from a background working at gig and working within operators, and he's seen from the inside how operators work. He has that insight from, inside the belly of the beast, if you will. He understands how those pain points are actually felt by operators, right? It's one thing for somebody to come in from outside the industry and say, hey, this looks like a pain point, let me solve it for you. But unless you've been on the inside and have really felt it trying to run a business and grow a business, you don't really have a true appreciation for the acuteness of that pain point. And Rob, to me, represents this class of founders that are in the space right now that are bringing their experience working in roles within operators and suppliers in this space and bringing that context and understanding and domain expertise into their projects. And Rob is a great case study in that. And to me, there's a really clear line of demarcation, I think, from some of the founders that are coming in that have no industry background. Not to say you need the background, but I really now truly appreciate just how much of an accelerant and leg up that gives the founders that are coming in with their ideas that do have a bit of operating background on their CV. So Rob is a great example of that. Obviously, he's backed by some very prolific industry investors, including our mutual friends at Happy Hour, and he's doing extremely well. I also really love the model he's pursuing, right? It's a SaaS model, it's a simple monthly payment, like commercially speaking, really trying to make it easy to get to yes in the purchase decision from the operators. So it's affordable, it works. It's, the cost of it doesn't scale with the use of it. He's really done a nice job building something in a very unsexy part of the stack. And I got to tip my hat to Rob for how he's going about it.
Yeah, it's a brilliant business idea because if you're able to demonstrate that by using your product, you will be able to, let's say, generate X percentage more deposits, let's say, or increase loyalty from the customer by 1% even, multiply that over millions of accounts, and you obviously have a business case. It's such small margins that even the tiniest improvement will mean potentially millions of euro extra revenue for a major operator, right? So especially at scale, this is an incredible tool. There is another business as well, a Swedish business called checkin.com as well, which is on a similar line, but they are focusing on the registration process. So same thing there. The idea is if you can increase your registration process from having too many dropouts in that process by just a single percent, then of course you will have a lot more new users by implementing this tool. And they're also doing incredibly well. They are now a publicly traded company as well. And so yeah, it's interesting with these companies that are focused on this incremental improvements, but that will have a major impact on your business overall. Yeah, what's the business number 4, Jesse?
All right, next on the list here, I'm going to shout out Forecasters. And Forecasters is a betting exchange. Betting exchanges themselves aren't particularly or necessarily innovative, but Forecasters to me is an interesting story. And I'll try and frame it up here. It was co-founded by two guys, Zach and Adam, American guys, and they started, I would say, 2017 or 2018. So by, I guess, age, they're maybe not a startup, but certainly in their DNA, they very much still are a startup. And what I love about what these guys have built, number one, their original thesis back in 2017, and you have to get in the time machine and go back to remember the world at that time. But at that time, the crypto markets were in a bull run at that time. And really, that was the time in which Ethereum specifically really started to capture people's attention and imagination. And for Zach and Adam, their original iteration of Forecasters was building on the Ethereum blockchain, using smart contracts and all these things we're now familiar with. But at that time, it was very novel stuff. They came to market, tried to build that out, and I think they had an aha moment where they realized that wasn't the right strategy, and they pivoted. So these guys, I don't even think either of them are 30 yet, but at that time, they were very much in their early 20s, very young. They had a real wisdom beyond their years insofar as being willing to pivot and executing a pivot. And their exchange that they've now built and had in market, it's a very interesting proposition because it's, number one, it's by invite only. And as we both well know, Pierre, exchanges rely only on liquidity, which means you need to have as many people coming in as possible, providing liquidity to the exchange in order for an exchange, to function efficiently. And it's a bit of a contrarian take to have it as invite only, but really who they're catering to is professional bettors. And they're basically setting up an exchange that is professional bettors, syndicates, people taking big positions. This is a platform for those people. And Zach and Adam have done a brilliant job building the brand, establishing trustworthiness, onboarding these very large players to their platform. Zach posted something a few weeks ago for 2024. The Forecasters platform traded $375 million in 2024 on their exchange, which is no small amount of money. So I really, got to give my credit to them. But they've also been grinding for 7 or 8 years, right? That's an impressive number objectively, but not an overnight success. You and I have talked about, the 12-year overnight success of Next.io. Same thing with Forecasters. It's a 7-year overnight success story. The other thing I love about Zach and Adam, they've bootstrapped this thing the entire way. We talk a lot on podcasts like this, Pierre, about investors and, the whole sort of investor ecosystem and what investors are looking for. But we don't talk enough, in my opinion, about the people that are out there rolling up their sleeves, putting in that sweat equity, bootstrapping their ideas until they find that product market fit. And to me, that's under celebrated. And I, personally this year want to try and find more of those people and celebrate them more. Because to me, those are the real success stories, is people that have, tried, failed, pivoted, try again, and keep coming back to iterate on their idea until they find that product market fit. To me, Forecasters really ticks all those boxes. And I'm really excited for Zach and Adam to continue to grow this platform. And I guess, they're well into the 9-figure territory. Next stop is $1 billion traded. So I don't know if that's their goal for this year, but I think they're on a really strong trajectory, and they're a fantastic success story for our space.
It's such an important foundation to have for a business that is moving into profitability, let's say, to come from a culture of bootstrapping. Because eventually, any successful business will go through a difficult period at some point or the other. It's just something you have to assume. If you don't, it's because you're pure lucky, right? But you have to assume that your business at some point will go through a difficult period. And coming from a culture of bootstrapping, especially during those times, means that you'll be ready to navigate those difficult times that will hit your business, and you'll be well prepared to weather those type of storms. It's very hard, I think, to go from a mentality of being a high-spending, well-earning business into a bootstrap mode if that's never been part of your culture, than the other way around. And that's why I think, even if you're a well-funded startup, it's so important to have that mentality of bootstrapping your business and so on. So yeah, interesting and good to hear. They definitely have the future ahead of themselves.
Yeah, I would just add one more thing there, Pierre, just in terms of the qualities that I think are, befitting of people that bootstrap, is this like sense of resiliency, right? Like not only are they, resilient pushing through all of the challenges that are inherent with bootstrapping, but like these are individuals as people that are probably very resilient in their own lives. And that is a huge asset, and positions them well to weather the storms you talk about, because there are those storms for all of us, whether or not we admit it. And I just think that there is a level of resiliency from the entrepreneurs that are bootstrapping. Not to say that those that get external funding don't have it, but it's just a slightly different mindset one needs to have to put their blood, sweat, and tears into building their business rather than somebody else's money.
Yeah, 100% easy. All right, business number 5.
Home stretch here. Okay. Number 5, I need to shout out some fellow Canadians here, so I will do that. I'm going to shout out the team at Hot Takes, and I will provide a quick disclosure here, I guess. I have been advising them, so we'll get that out of the way. But Hot Takes is a free-to-play app and product to basically help people get comfortable with the idea of sports betting before they open up a real money betting account and actually put their funds into it. They position it as like paper trading for sports betting, almost like practicing. They've implemented some really cool things, Pierre. They have it's gamified. So what that means is there's all sorts of interesting social features and hooks. But really, what I think is interesting is people can play this free product every day, and just by playing it, they can still earn real money without putting $1 into it. You actually can't put your money into it, so that makes that easy. But through gameplay and through consistent gameplay, you can still earn money and earn rewards. And it's really gotten a lot of traction. It's co-founded by 3 very good university friends. 2 of them just graduated from university in the last 6 months. So they're first time founders, really first time having a job out of university. They've been operating in their home market of Ontario as well, and they've had a lot of success in Ontario in 2024. They really, again, are trying to create this environment for people to learn how to bet on sports. And I know we don't use the term risk-free, but because you can't put money into it and there's not real money involved, they're really trying to create this a safe environment for people to learn the fundamentals of sports betting before graduating to real money sports betting. When those people are ready to bet for real money, obviously Hot Takes is there to help them find the right sports book that's best for their betting style and their needs. Hot Takes is an affiliate business, so they're driving a lot of new customers to the operators in Ontario, and they've had a lot of success doing so. I don't know if I'm allowed to share their metrics, but I think they shared it at the Pitch Ice competition the other week. So, almost 5 figures worth of new depositing customers last year for operators in Ontario through their app. And they're in a very exciting place because they've actually just launched in the US market in the last few weeks. And they're making a big push, again, somewhat similar to Betty in the sense that they've got their start and proved their product market fit in Ontario. They're now taking those learnings and trying to replicate that in the big prize of the US market. They've got really good support behind them. One of their investors and advisors is John Gordon from Incentive Games. John, to me, is one of the best product minds in the industry. Incentive Games, his company, really focuses hard on gamification. They themselves are absolutely crushing it. They provide a lot of free-to-play games for tier ones like Bet365 and FanDuel. And for John to see in Hot Takes that level of potential says a lot about what Hot Takes is working on. And what I love about the three founders, having gotten to know them over the last year, they embody, I think, most, if not all, of the characteristics any one of us would want to see from a young founder, which is obviously you want to see some level of smarts and intuition and just sort of like some base level of like understanding about what they're working on and what they're building. Really, what I love about these guys is they are very humble. They are very coachable. They want to learn from people like John, to some extent, people like myself, and other people that they've surrounded themselves with on their cap table. And they are really trying to build a durable business and acknowledging that they don't know everything. They're here to learn. And I love that mindset. And I do have enough conversations with people where I do feel as though that mindset is missing at times from other founders. And to me, Hot Takes is like the perfect package of like opportunity, product execution, and just like the right people at the helm. So really excited for them as fellow Canadians now with their eyes on the prize of the US. And I think they're going to have a big year ahead. So I would expect you're going to be hearing more about Hot Takes in the coming months here.
Well, an absolute fantastic top list here, Jesse. And with Hot Takes, another affiliate, right? So this sounds like it's an affiliate model that they are pursuing. Another affiliate model that is not an SEO affiliate then, right? Which is kind of gathering a community through a separate product and then funneling them into an operator. So to your point in the beginning here, that kind of this traditional SEO affiliation model is somewhat a thing of the past, leaving room for these more innovative ways to funnel players into the landscape. Yeah, really interesting.
For sure. Pierre, I'm going to go, I'm going to hijack things for a second and add one more to the list, which I'm calling a one to watch.
Number 6, the bonus one.
And this is somewhat of a prediction. I know you love your predictions. You're in the business predictions. My prediction for this particular company I'm going to mention is that not everybody will have heard of them here and now. My prediction is a year from now, everybody will have heard of them. So let me set it up. This is another Canadian company. This one, I'm trying not to show my bias here, based out of Vancouver, founded by Sandra Wong. And Sandra is an amazing product person.
She's a game developer, right?
She is a game developer. Exactly right, Pierre. Lucky Lady Games is her business. Sandra comes from the world of social casino. She spent years working for virtual gaming worlds, obviously the company behind Chumba Casino, which is, I would say, the granddaddy of sweepstakes companies in the US. And she was a very critical part of the success of VGW in the US. And in recent years, she's gone out on her own. She's been doing a lot of consulting for other social casinos, but she's finally ready to do it herself. She's built up Lucky Lady Games. And what I love about her approach to this, Pierre, she spent the last couple of years building a really strong team. And they've spent the last couple of years really building an amazing platform, a technology platform that they really haven't talked about too much yet. And I don't know if I don't know how much I should be sharing here, because she's going to share more on her own time here. But I really want to give her due, because the platform she's building, she gave me a demo a couple of months ago. It is so cool. I'm a pretty hard guy to impress when it comes to social casino experiences. This one is really cool. And Sandra is somebody who is always looking at the newest technologies. So there's like everything from there's an obviously AI is featured within it, but there's an augmented reality piece where you can create your own character in this virtual casino, and like super cool. There's like a 3D component to it. She's tinkered around with blockchain technology as well. Exactly. And I think 2025 is the year that Lucky Lady Games is going to take this really impressive technology they developed, and they're going to bring it to market. She's figuring out her go-to-market strategy now. I won't reveal sort of how she's thinking about it, but I do think that is going to be a name that by the end of this year, people will have heard about, and it will make a bit of a splash in the market. Not to set a bar too high for Sandra, but if anybody can exceed it, it's her. She's an amazing person, an amazing entrepreneur, and I want to throw her on my one to watch list for 2025.
Very interesting. Okay, so when we come back in 1 year, we'll have to do a review and bring these startups back and see how it all turned out.
Sure.
Jesse, so let's turn the tables a bit also. So these startups are obviously funded by some really fantastic and forward-thinking investors that are fueling the startup landscape over in the US. Who are the main investors that are making things happen at the moment and allowing the startup landscape to flourish?
Great question. Interestingly, just a couple of days ago, you dropped the latest episode of your podcast, Vested Interest, with our friends Benji and Lloyd Danzig. It was interesting listening to their comments on that episode, Pierre, as it relates to their individual investing activity. Obviously, those two people specifically are very well known, very prolific investors within our space, but it's interesting to hear their anecdotes around the fact that they're both writing fewer checks these days, but the checks they are writing and the founders they are backing, they're going to be bigger checks and bigger stakes in those businesses because they want to only now invest and deploy capital into those founders and opportunities where they have the highest level of conviction. And I thought that was quite interesting in the sense, like, these are people you would normally associate with being the ones writing all the checks. By their own admission, if they're writing less, like, well, where's that capital going to come from now? Over the last little while, I have seen some evidence that there is new capital taking an interest in the real money gaming space. It might not necessarily be sports betting specifically. It might be DFS. It might be, sweepstakes or prediction markets. But I do think we're at an interesting point now where the industry in the US is getting to a point of maturity where the level of understanding and credibility is there now, such that what Chris Grove might call non-endemic sources of capital are now starting to enter the space. I've seen some evidence of that, and people joining cap tables that are names that are new to the real money gaming space. So, bit of an interesting shift potentially that, some of the, reliable names we might know are writing less checks. That being said, there is new names and new capital allocators entering the space. And I think that is an interesting trend that entrepreneurs ought to be mindful of. I still probably get a weekly WhatsApp message or email asking for an introduction to a Benji or a Lloyd or other people that we know. And I got to, I have to politely decline those just because I know they're, looking for arguably less deals or less deal flow, not more. So it's like, where do I direct those introductions to? Luckily, we do have a level of interest, I think, in these deals and these opportunities now from outside of the space, which is something I haven't really seen a lot of over the last few years.
Yeah, brilliant, Jesse. So let's move over to next NYC. So 12th and 13th of March, the event is happening in its 4th edition. Super exciting. We have an incredible lineup, and we're expecting around 1,000 people to congregate in the Lower Manhattan in the financial district over there. And Jesse, you and your colleague Travis of WagerWire recently announced the new, really exciting startup award show called the Starties. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll do a quick plug for the Starties, Pierre. So I really have to, give Travis all of the credit for the idea here. Just a quick origin story. It dates back for me to September in Lisbon. Travis and I caught up casually there, and him and his co-founders at WagerWire were coming off some experiences where they were at traditional industry award show where WagerWire was named as a finalist in a category alongside much bigger names, and predictably those much bigger names won those awards. And there's a little bit of a chip on their shoulder that the WagerWire team had about that, and rightfully so for a lot of reasons. But what that did do is sparked an idea that I think probably Travis would admit started off as a bit of a joke, as many good ideas often do, or a bit of like a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing. And they said, hey, there should be an award show only for startup and growth stage companies in this space. So they were kind of sitting on that idea. I caught up with Travis in Lisbon. We sat down over a beer, and he told me the idea. And I said, well, you know what, that actually is quite a good idea. And I do think that does meet an unmet need in the space right now. So we left Lisbon, kind of digested it. We caught up a little while later on a call. We're like, hey, like, is that idea still a valid one? And we're both like, yeah, we think so. And we spent the last couple of months of 2024 really crystallizing the vision for the Starties, the concept of the event itself that we want to throw, which is quite different, I would say, than anybody that's been to a traditional industry awards event. We're kind of going the other way with it and flipping the script. And we also spent that time pitching and trying to get some buy-in from people that we would need to onboard as key partners, which does include yourself and your team at Next.io, Pierre. And it really came together in December. And we looked ahead. We're saying, hey, the calendar is about to roll over into a new year. If we're going to do this, we need to figure out when and where we're going to do this. And there was no perfect, no better place, no more perfect place for us to launch this than at the next New York City Summit in March alongside you and your team. So we'll give our gratitude to you here now for taking a bit of a flyer on this crazy concept. But for as crazy as the concept is, it's certainly I think has captured the imagination of people, and certainly there's a level of enthusiasm for it since we announced the launch, just over a week ago now at the time of this recording. And look, the Starties is, as the tagline says on the Starties.com homepage, it's the gaming awards show by startups for startups. It really is putting these early stage companies front and center and making an event about them, rather than having a token rising star category alongside 19 other categories for incumbents to win. We really wanted to flip the script and make this all about the startups. And that's what it's going to be. It's all about building community, celebrating the journey that all of these founders are on. Yes, there will be an awards component. We're not taking it too seriously. We like to think the awards mean something, and there is a level of seriousness to it. But we also are bucking the trend of it being a black tie sort of buttoned up event with $5,000 tables and $500 dinners and all of this. It's going to be something befitting of startups, and again, really putting the startup journey and those founders front and center. And it's going to be a lot of fun, first and foremost. So been a ton of fun to put this together. Obviously now I find myself randomly in the events business. So we're on the clock here. We have just over a month to pull off the final plans, but we're on a good trajectory. And we do promise it's going to be a fun, memorable night for those that can make it. And hopefully is the start of, a recurring semi-annual or annual award show for the Starties. So yeah, it's a super cool initiative. For me personally, with everything I'm doing with betting startups, Pierre, this really seems like a natural extension of a lot of the stuff I'm already doing. And really, again, is just another way for us to help nurture the community, help build connection. There's so much benefit that comes from putting founders together, and a lot of peer support, the sense of being fellow travelers on a shared journey. We want to lean into that and nurture that. And that's really what the Starties is all about.
The founding story of Starties reminds me of a bit of a Vegas legend. I don't know if you know the story, the founding story of Hakkasan in Vegas, but it started because a particularly wealthy businessman was trying to enter Excess in the Encore, a nightclub over there that was the hottest nightclub in Vegas at the time. He was not allowed entry, quite rudely, by the security guards, and trying to get into the nightclub by a table, he was refused entry. And he said, "Screw you guys, I'm going to start my own nightclub and completely out-compete you guys and create something much, much better." And therefore, the first mega club in Vegas was born out in Hakkasan. Then that became kind of the starting point of this mega trend of mega nightclubs over there. So yeah, similarly here, Travis got rejected, didn't win the award, and decided, "Screw you guys, I'm starting my own award show." And here we go. The coolest, most amazing award show of the industry is here. I get a good laugh every time I go to LinkedIn and I see the latest post in the startups marketing campaign. It's absolutely brilliant. It has a very light touch and a lighthearted feeling to it. And we absolutely love to support this. This is just absolutely brilliant. Yeah, kudos to you guys.
Yeah, and thank you again, Pierre. And I tip my hat to Travis. He really is the one with the vision here. And the brand, to your point, the branding, the messaging, the positioning, it's kind of fun. It's lighthearted. It's a little bit irreverent. That's all Travis. He is such an amazing creative mind. It's been a lot of fun, amazing. And will continue to be a lot of fun. So shout out to him. Appreciative to him for bringing me on this journey with him.
Yeah, he's a great guy, Travis, for sure. Another project as well. I mean, Jesse, when we met a couple of years ago, we immediately realized that, okay, we need to find how we can work together. What you guys are doing is incredible, and we share a lot of similarities personality-wise, and we get along really well as friends. And now, finally, it's all happening here, Jesse. So a second project that we are starting together as well will be the Investor and Startup Summit that we're organizing in Valletta, our second show, which is taking place on the 7th and 8th of May. So the Investor and Startup Summit, this new project, is taking place on the 6th of May, which basically aims to gather some of the most interesting startups of the industry together with the most profilistic and respected investors under one roof to gather everyone together and create some really serious business opportunities for those two cohorts to come together at. And that's the 6th of May as well. I don't know if you want to fill in anything above what I just mentioned as well, but it's another really exciting partnership that we have between each other.
For sure, Pierre. I'll quickly speak to that from my perspective. So again, not to turn this into the Pierre fanboy hour over here, but I really got to give you and your team. No, I give you a lot of credit for this idea and this concept, Pierre. Again, talking about industry events at large, they're all trying to figure out ways to provide value to startups to attend their events. And look, we know this, it's time consuming to travel to these places and travel to these events. It's expensive, right? Flights and hotels aren't cheap. Oftentimes you get sick at the event and you lose a week of productivity afterwards recovering, as I know you
as
are
we know,
just
yes.
getting over now, coming from ice. So there's a big level of commitment required to attend these events. And therefore, for startups who are notoriously resource constrained, you have to be very selective about what they attend to try and maximize the ROI on the events they attend. And what I love about this concept for the Valletta event is you're giving dedicated airspace and physical space to facilitating the all-important connections between founders and capital allocators. I love the format and the structure you're creating to help, spark those introductions, spark those conversations that in, 3, 6, maybe 12 months after the event, those initial introductions might result in a check being written and the addition of one of those investors onto a cap table of one of these startups. And I just love the way you're thinking about creating value for startups in general and creating value for entrepreneurs. I think the format of this particular event and the structure of it is going to add a ton of value. I'm very, very excited to be a supporter of it. Certainly encourage anybody that thinks they might be looking to raise capital in 2025 or beyond to consider attending this, because you are going to be filling the room with people that are credible investors from the space that are actively deploying capital. And, there's not many better places one can choose to go and spend 6, 8, or 8 hours in a day to maximize the surface area in front of these capital allocators. So this is going to be a fantastic event. I think there is a lot of a potential for it in the future, but for a first iteration, there's already an enormous amount of value to startups. So I will certainly be promoting that a little bit in the coming months here and encouraging those that can make that investment and commitment to traveling to Malta for the event to seriously consider doing so, because the ROI absolutely will be there.
Exciting times ahead, that's for sure, Jesse. So we have, of course, the Starties coming up during next New York, and the Startup and Investor Retreat coming up before next Valletta. So stay tuned for that. Final question for you today, Jesse. What are your personal ambitions, would you say? Looking forward now into the next 2 or 3 years, you're creating a very powerful network, a very powerful community, very powerful database, very powerful name, very powerful reach. We spoke earlier, of course, in the episode that not sure exactly where this is all leading, but I'm still curious to know a little bit more what your ambitions are. Like, do you see this taking root to something much bigger in the future?
Potentially now. I think, again, a year ago, if you asked me that, I'd be like, I'd be a bit resistant to answering that affirmatively. Whereas now I do have bigger ambitions for this. And I think now, the Starties is a bit of an example of that, and supporting your event in Valletta is an example of that. I'm really trying to now broaden the impact I believe that my platform has been having within the industry over the last couple of years. And I just want to continue to have that impact and create that value and, try and make things happen. That's it. Things have changed for me a lot over the last year, Pierre, like a personal level. Obviously I'm a father now, and it's really remarkable, like how much that shifts one's mindset towards every aspect of life, including with business. And I need to reconcile a little bit about like how aggressively I want to like pursue business opportunities and how much ambition there is there versus like finding something that keeps me happy, obviously like pays for all of like the expensive baby toys and diapers, while still allowing me like a lot of latitude to spend time with my baby, because I admittedly have been enjoying that way more than I ever thought I would. And I don't want to lose that. And I do recognize that as entrepreneurs, there's a lot of conversation about work-life balance right now, because it is just me and I'm only really accountable to myself, other than obviously partners and collaborators. I have that latitude to kind of strike that level of balance that I want to strike. So I'm trying to work that out in real time. There is, I think, a lot of potential on the road ahead for me. I think my unanswered question for today, and maybe in a year's time, we'll check back on it. But my question is like what that scale of ambition is. I don't have a clear sense of that. I think there's a viable path to building a meaningful business with the foundation I've laid over the last 3 years. I don't know whether I'm committed to putting in all of the blood, sweat, and tears to build it to the scale that I think it could become, versus building an interesting business, which for me and my collaborators and my partners in it and my team, is interesting to us, but, from the perspective of like an institutional investor, probably wouldn't be a very investable business. So I need to figure out like the scale of the ambition, I guess, is the full takeaway here. But having that optionality, I think, is a privileged position, and I'm very grateful to have that. It hasn't been without a lot of effort and hard work, and I've manufactured that myself. It hasn't come to me. I've created it, but I have that now. So we'll see where it all leads. But for now, I'm just focused on executing, man. There's a lot of stuff that we're committed to now, and new stuff we're going to be announcing soon that's in flight. So more to come there. Sky's the limit, but it's a question of how high I want to fly in the sky.
Well, as long as we can keep this tradition going, Jesse, and we can record these episodes together on a yearly basis, that's all that I'm asking for from you, at least. So I'm very happy with that. Jesse, thank you so much once again for coming on board on the podcast, highlighting some of the most exciting and interesting startups that we have in the space today, and for shedding some light on the industry at large. Really want to thank you for everything that you do as well, and it's been great to form this friendship over the last couple of years. And I'm looking forward to see you in person in New York in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you for having me back, Pierre. We'll see you soon, my friend. Appreciate it.